Can the carnivore diet help with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, otherwise known as Sibo? I have a case report today that's published in a journal that says yes, and you'll get all the details here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. Come follow me over here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. We do go live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, so thank you guys for being here today. We also simulcast live over on my Facebook page as well as over on Twitch. Just a reminder, download the Twitch app, follow Jimmy Moore Rants, and you can watch the show from there. If you missed the live here on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page, no worries. You can just pop on over just as soon as this is over. Watch it on demand on IGTV. We put it up over there. It's also up over on Twitch on replay as well as on YouTube. Type in a keyword Jimmy Rants in YouTube. You'll find the show, and then you can find all the latest episodes. Speaking of YouTube, today is Thursday, and Thursday I do a podcast called Real Talk. And so on today's episode of Real Talk, I have a gentleman who is a PhD in rhetoric. His name, Dr. Dan French, and we had a great conversation about how language is being used to persuade people to do things. And rhetoric can be used in a very positive way, or rhetoric can be used in a very negative way. And he helps you kind of cut through the muckety-muck of how to tell the difference about who's being ethical with their rhetoric and who's being unethical. So go check that out. It's over on YouTube right now. Just as soon as you're done with Jimmy Rants, you can go and watch that interview, or you can listen to it on the Real Talk podcast. LLVLC.com is where it will be by midday, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then finally, you can watch all the past episodes of Jimmy Rants over at the official website for this show, JimmyRants.com. Okay, you guys, today I have yet another study to share with you, and I love that there's so much research coming out about ketogenic diets, about carnivore diets, about the value of carbohydrate restriction. Because one of the common refrains I keep hearing over and over and over again is, well, show me the evidence. Tell me, how is it that you can eat an all-meat diet or a mostly animal-based diet and not be unhealthy? That seems so unhealthy. And it's like it's predicated on all the negative imagery that you guys know we deal with out there. Red meat's been vilified, saturated fat's been vilified, so therefore people just assume it's automatically unhealthy without really taking any second look at it. And so when we get research and it starts to pile up, and you guys know I cover all of this research here on this show, that way you stay on the cutting edge. I want to make sure you never miss anything that comes out. And I'm pledging to try to do that. I miss a few things, but I get most of the stuff when it comes out, because it further emboldens why you're eating keto, why you're eating carnivore. So I have a study today that was published, and it was out of Sweden. The researchers out of Gothenburg, Sweden, and from the Institution for Medicine and Health. And it was published, I'm trying to see what journal it was published in. I think I cut that part off of the research. Sorry about that, but you could go look this up by its title. The title of the paper, A Zero Carbohydrate Carnivore Diet Can Normalize Hydrogen-Positive Small Intestinal Bacterial Overgrowth Lactulose Breath Tests, a Case Report. So this just came out last week. It's a brand new study published out there. And what they did was they took a look at basically Sibo. So if you're not familiar with Sibo, if you've never had it, thank your lucky stars, because it's a nasty condition that is really painful and really hard to deal with. And so they're like looking at what are the mechanisms behind what makes Sibo worse. And actually carbs make it worse. And so the complete elimination of carbs seems to make sense, which is what a carnivore diet does. So let's read from the abstract of this study. Background. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, otherwise known as Sibo, is a clinical condition characterized by an excessive bacterial growth in your small intestine. Clinical symptoms might be non-specific: dyspepsia, bloating, or abdominal discomfort. Nevertheless, Sibo can cause you to have severe malabsorption, meaning you can't get the vitamins and minerals and nutrients out of the foods that you eat. Serious malnutrition, and that makes sense as well, because of some of the pain in the stomach. It's hard to digest all the foods you eat, therefore you become malnourished. Immune reactions, because the body just doesn't like having to fight constantly, but it does have this immune reaction. And then, of course, deficiency syndromes. When you start becoming deficient in various vitamins and minerals, that manifests as disease and symptoms of disease in the body. So they conducted a retrospective case report that had 6 patients, all with positive Sibo breath tests. The patients chose between different therapeutic options, and they willingly consented to a nutritional intervention that was 0 carb, 0 fiber, carnivore, and they extended it over 2 to 6 weeks of time. The rationale for this dietary approach was based on the idea that opportunistic carbohydrate-favoring bacteria and methanogens proliferate in the small intestines if the natural barriers in the digestive tract have been weakened due to stress. And it makes sense. Like, if you're going to exacerbate Sibo, one of the best ways to do it is to eat carbohydrates, even so-called healthy ones like fibrous ones. This has always been my problem with the heavy push of fiber. Oh, we need more fiber in our diet. Says who? What if you have issues internally in the gut or in the intestines and other organs where fiber is contraindicative to you being optimally healthy? So what do you do with the fiber then? So is it healthy in one context but not in another context? I'm not saying that all fiber is bogus, but it does seem we have overblown the positive effects that come from consuming fiber. A 0 carb carnivore diet, which consists primarily of animal fats and proteins, could essentially eliminate all of the carbohydrate favoring bacteria through starvation while still providing plenty of both calories and nutrients. And this is something that's talked about a lot within the realm of gut health. Oh my gosh, how do you feed your gut microbiome? How do you keep your diversity of the microbes in your gut if you're not eating at least fibrous carbs? And I keep thinking and wondering out loud, what if you stop eating fibrous carbs and you kill off certain species in the gut? But that species in the gut was only there to deal with the carbohydrates in your diet. So what if you don't eat carbohydrates in the diet? Why would you need those species there? It's interesting, and it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective that over time, if people's diets shift, so too does their gut microbiome. Why do we keep demanding that gut microbiome fits some protocol that's based on a carb-based diet when some people happily choose to live without carbs in their diet? That's always kind of perplexed me. Oh my gosh, you low-carb people, your microbiome, you're messing up your microbiome. No, we're customizing it to our diet. And yet they keep wanting to keep that diversity in the microbiome. If you're just joining us, I'm reading from a January 2021 Swedish case report. And what they found, and we're going to get into the details here in a minute, is great promise for the carnivore diet when it comes to treating small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, otherwise known as Sibo. So they took 6 patients from a functional medicine clinic. They put them all on a strict 0 carb, 0 fiber carnivore diet for a period of 2 to 6 weeks. They used a Lactulose breath test immediately before and after the diet change, as well as doing extensive medical testing all throughout. So in the results, 5 patients that followed the carnivore diet for 4 weeks or longer all tested negative for Sibo at the end of the protocol. All of them that did it at least 4 weeks or longer. The one patient that only endured the diet for 2 weeks had a near complete eradication of her hydrogen elevation. So even in 2 weeks, there was such benefit to the Sibo that had that one patient gone just 2 more weeks after that, probably would have completely eliminated the Sibo. Methane values were generally low both before and after the daily dietary treatment, but there was significant decreases in 3 of the patients. So the conclusion in this paper, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, the carbohydrate, zero fiber, carnivore diet will show great potential for being a readily available, cost-effective, and equally effective alternative treatment for Sibo. According to our observations, it also results in better satisfaction after meals. Anybody that's had Sibo knows that feeling after a meal, it's just, it's so horrible, which is why people don't tend to digest well, because they feel that. They're like, oh my God. Decreased cravings for sweets, which is natural. When you reduce carbohydrate, you replace it with fat and protein, which is what a zero carb carnivore diet does. You don't have those things. And generates weight loss in patients where needed. Again, like we talked about in a study day before yesterday, it was the Gary Taubes on Monday, the column he wrote. When you cut carbohydrates, the benefit that comes is it lowers insulin levels. And through the lowering of insulin is why you have fat loss happen. All right, let's get into the background of this study. Small intestinal overgrowth, SIBO, is denoted as an increase in the overall bacterial population within your small intestine, particularly in the types of bacteria not commonly found in that part of the digestive tract. There are 3 different types of SIBO. Some of the bacteria produce hydrogen, others produce methane, and a third group produces hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen and methane producing bacteria are easily detected using a lactulose breath test. The symptoms typically include gastrointestinal issues, things like diarrhea, steatorrhea, chronic abdominal pain, bloating, and flatulence. So anybody that's had this, it sucks. Like you think, oh my God, I don't want to eat anything because every time I eat, I feel crappy. I have all these side effects that make me not pleasant to be around. It is increasingly popular to treat all of these symptoms with dietary changes. Elemental diet, as well as the low FODMAP diet, is increasingly popular to treat these symptoms with dietary changes. And it's continuously being used with a high success rate, putting this SIBO into remission. Elemental diet is a mixture of pre-digested amino acids, so pre-digested proteins, fats, sugars, and vitamins, all in liquid form, while the low FODMAP is a diet low in fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. That's what FODMAP stands for, as these nutrients are poorly absorbed and commonly cause gut issues. So a low FODMAP diet is not relevant as a SIBO treatment, but rather to give relief from IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. SIBO and IBS oftentimes are mentioned in conjunction with one another, but they are not always dependent on one another. According to studies, SIBO is the most common cause of IBS, but not the one and only cause. Other explanations for IBS could be celiac disease or some kind of dysbiosis in the colon. So they looked at the main mechanisms restricting bacterial colonization in the upper gut, and they found the gastric acid barrier and mucosal and systemic immunity. So when these mechanisms all fail, bacterial overgrowth starts to develop. Another cause for bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine could be due to inefficient migrating motor complex, known as MMC. Bacteria, which normally should have been transported to the colon, remains in the small intestine, and it just keeps reproducing there. So the functional medicine model of care provides an operating system that works to reverse illness, promote health, and optimize function by addressing underlying causes, symptoms, and functional imbalances in interconnected biological networks. By the way, big fan of functional medicine. When you go to see a traditional doctor, they're not doing functional medicine. They're doing traditional medicine, and under that protocol, they don't look for root causes. They look for symptoms, and then what drug can they give you, or what procedure can they give you to deal with said symptoms. They don't know what to do with, you've got a symptom, all right, let me run tests to look deeper at what that is. Most people, when they go to their doctor, they think they're acting as a functional medicine type of doctor, and they're not doing that at all. So this is why I'm a big fan of people that work in functional medicine. And if you're ever trying to get to the root cause of something in your health, always, always, always try to opt for functional medicine. The functional medicine approach to Sibo includes treating the underlying disease, giving nutritional support, and producing broad spectrum antibiotics. However, antibiotics increase the risk of antibiotic resistance, and they undermine your healthy gut flora. Thus, they compromise your entire immune system. So, as an alternative, the patients in this case report were recommended to follow a zero carb, zero fiber carnivore diet for a period of at least 2 weeks to 6 weeks. So they theorized in this paper that Sibo would thrive on carbohydrates and fiber and starve when you eliminate that macronutrient altogether. According to a study previously used, there was some E. coli metabolism in the gut. The bacteria grew best on sugar. So under that assumption that E. coli flourished when you fed the person sugar, if you eliminate sugar and all sources of turning to sugar in the body, aka all carbohydrates, then you should be able to kill off bad bacteria. So the carnivore diet in recent years has gained popularity as the extreme end of the low-carb diet. The diet is commonly utilized by people with overly sensitive immune systems and to treat resistant obesity. Even though there is evolutionary evidence for animal-based nutrition in our species, there are no published original research articles or clinical reports on the therapeutic effects of a carnivore diet. And one reason for this might be the controversial status of only eating animal-based foods. I do know that Dr. Sean Baker and the Meat RX group that he's part of, they are currently seeking funding for doing said research on the carnivore diet. I think they've raised around $250,000 worth of money. So they'll be able to do some quality research. So stay tuned. There will be research of the carnivore diet coming. It's just not out yet. This case report from our functional medicine clinic is not about looking at the long-term effect of the carnivore diet. Our purpose is not to promote necessarily a zero-carb carnivore diet, but instead we're trying to present evidence that it has effectiveness as a cost-effective, readily available short-term nutritional therapy to help normalize a hydrogen-positive result in those with Sibo. And they're right. Like, if you look at all the alternatives, drug therapy, and some of the other procedures that they try to do to help deal with the symptoms of Sibo, it's really not doing anything. So you need something that's easy, that people can do. It fits within their lifestyle, and everybody eats. And so you could easily just say, okay, just eat steak. And then it's cost effective because in the long run, buying steak, while seemingly expensive for a food, is a whole hell of a lot cheaper than drugs. So that's kind of cool. So the methods in this case report is the Sibo breath tests were recorded between October 2018 and August of 2020. All 6 subjects were regular patients at a functional medicine clinic in Sweden. They followed the structured process used by the clinic. The subjects consented, to scientific publication of their data. So in other words, they knew they were a part of a research study. So this wasn't sprung on them after they went through this. They visited an MD who performed extensive blood panels, GI effects, comprehensive stool test, nutrient and toxic element profile. They got an IgG antibody screening for food intolerances, and they got a Sibo breath test. So the Sibo breath test was performed both before and directly after on the last day of their dietary change. No antibiotic drugs or antimicrobial agents were used at all during this treatment period. There was no commercially available diagnostic tool for hydrogen sulfide when these patients were treated. So what did the diet look like? All patients were instructed to follow a strict zero carb, zero fiber carnivore diet for a period of 2 to 6 weeks. Here's what the diet consisted of. Only animal fats and proteins, which included all types of meat, organ meats, fish, poultry, tallow, lard, and eggs. There were no vegetables, no vegetable oils, no dairy, except for butter. Extra intake of table salt was recommended to compensate for sodium loss, and I'm so glad. See, the researcher here, Martina, where is her name? There she is, Martina Johansson. She knows when you go on a low-carb diet and a zero-carb diet, you're going to dump a bunch of salt. And so you have to compensate for that loss of salt by adding salt back in. So they did put that in there. Balances out the electrolytes. The patients could drink coffee, tea, and water, but no sweetened beverages and no diet soda. No calorie limits were put on these subjects, and they had no other restrictions implied other than what's already been said here. The patients were all encouraged to eat as much and as often as they want. That's got to be a trip, though. If you've never done a carnivore diet and you suddenly say to somebody, all right, I want you to go on a diet, and it's going to be really strict. Immediately people in the back of their mind, oh man, I'm going to be so hungry. And so, but then you say, anything that's animal, you can eat it. It's on the table. Eat it. Oh, wait. You not only get to eat it, you get to eat it in the quantity that you want. Not just that, but the quantity that you want whenever you want in a day. I'm sure they were sitting there going, wait a minute, what's the catch? No catch. Because the researcher knew if they eat adequate amounts of fat and protein, they're going to get satiety and they're not going to be hungry. And that's probably what they found. And plus they were skeptical because they've been dealing with their Sibo symptoms so bad that by the time they got to the dietary part of it, they're like, I don't know about this. But then they eat it and they go, holy crap, like they start to feel better. Maybe not those initial meals in the first few days, but by the end of that 3-4 weeks when they start to feel better, easily, they're like, oh, I will eat meat the rest of my life if this is how I can feel on it. All right, so let's take a look at the lactulose, hydrogen, and methane breath test. So they took 10 breath samples collected using glass vacuum vials with rubber tops, pushed on a rubber-clad needle. Patients were instructed to, in the morning after a greater than 12-hour overnight fast, breathe into a standardized plastic bag that's connected to the needle, and then they sample their breath at 0 minutes, and then they ingest a lactulose solution. Subsequent breath samples collected at 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, and 180 minutes. So every 10 minutes they did this test. Preparation before the test is normally 0 carb, 0 fiber the day before the test. The purpose for this is to starve off the bacteria prior to the test so that you can minimize any ongoing gut fermentation. This is why you get that bloating, you guys. If you wake up in the morning and you've got a distended gut, you've got fermentation going on in your gut. And so eating carnivore, they're saying, eliminates some of that fermentation from happening and eventually eliminates it altogether so that bloating goes away. So that's a little hack that you're learning from this study. If you wake up in the morning and you have bloated belly, it could be, women, you have other reasons why your belly bloats, so don't just necessarily think this is going to be across the board. But for the most part, if you eat carnivore, that bloat goes away. In our case, the strict diet was instead followed for 2 to 6 weeks. The sample is sent to Biolab Medical Unit in England for analysis and the measurement of hydrogen and methane. Since lactulose, unlike glucose, is poorly absorbed in the intestines but readily digested by gas-producing bacteria, this test will make it possible to detect bacterial overgrowth in your entire intestinal tract. So a positive lactulose breath test was defined as an increase of hydrogen of 20 ppms, parts per million, above baseline within the first 90 minutes, or if a hydrogen double peak was present, which is in line with our clinical experience, reinforcing the Sibo diagnosis. So that's how they do the test. Urine samples were then sent to Genova Diagnostics laboratories. What they were looking for in the urine was organic acids, which indicates cell functionality, nutrient balance, mitochondrial function, bacterial, fungus overgrowth, and more. They did some blood samples to analyze minerals, toxic elements, glutathione, CoQ10, vitamin D, and fatty acids. GI effects, comprehensive stool tests were also conducted and sent to Genova Diagnostics laboratories. They were looking for bacterial content in the colon, digestion of macronutrients, parasites, inflammation, and more. They're doing a totality, you guys, of exactly what's going on internally in these people with Sibo. They also did the IgG antibody test, food intolerance test that measures IgG antibodies in the blood for several foods. High levels of IgG antibodies indicate a delayed allergic reaction to that specific food. So they conducted blood samples and got them analyzed in Germany. Blood tests include a comprehensive blood panel that looked at the kidneys, thyroid, liver, nutrients, lipid panel, CRP, the inflammation marker, insulin, glucose, and more. They had questionnaires for each of the people in the study as well. They were filled out on the FunMed Clinic standard questionnaire about their lifestyle and current health status. They all had individual health concerns that were taken into consideration as they were being monitored and investigated. So we've gotten to the meat part of this, all pun intended, meat part of this carnivore study looking at Sibo, the results. Background data on all 6 patients are shown in Table 1 and Table 2. So let's take a look at that. I've got that real quick here. Subject 1 is a female that's 22 years old. Her main concern was stubborn fungal infections and rashes. She had nutrient deficiencies in magnesium, potassium, folate, and B12. She had the presence of hippuric acid in the urine. Gluten sensitivity and stomach discomfort were the gastrointestinal issues. E. coli in the stool sample was high, and the Sibo test after the diet treatment of 6 weeks was negative. That girl was really sick, and in just 6 weeks of eating a zero carb, zero fiber carnivore diet, totally negative for Sibo. The second patient, 65 years old, main concerns, prediabetes, overweight, hypertension, Cushing syndrome, and rosacea. Her nutrient deficiencies were magnesium, zinc, folate, B12, glycine, and also had elevated pyroglutamic acid and 5-HIAA. She also had the presence of hippuric acid in the urine. Her gastrointestinal issues were bloating and stomachache. She had a normal level of E. coli in the stool test, and after just 4 weeks, her Sibo got better. Patient 3 is 46-year-old female. Chronic constipation, high stress, poor sleep, dry skin, and slight rosacea are the concerns. Nutrient deficiencies, magnesium. Are you noticing a theme in the deficiencies? All of them deficient in magnesium. And several of them deficient in potassium. All of them deficient in B12. See, this is your clue. When you start looking at case studies like this and you start seeing the common nutrient deficiencies are all the same, that's your clue that you too are probably deficient. Now, get them tested, see where you stand, and then do the things to try to get sufficient. So magnesium, potassium, B2, B12, glycine, elevated 5-HIAA, pyroglutamic acid, and 1-methylhistidine. This one also had high levels of hippuric acid in the urine. The gastrointestinal issues, chronic constipation due to slow bowel movements, very high in E. coli, and within 2 weeks, this is the one that did not go longer than 2 weeks. From 2 weeks, hydrogen reduced from 150 ppms to 20 ppms. Major improvement. Methane reduced from 16 to 3. Again, had this patient gone ahead and gone 2 more weeks, probably would have completely shored up the Sibo. Patient 4, a 48-year-old female, main concerns cravings, fatigue, chronic diarrhea, and primary diagnosis of Graves' disease. So that's an autoimmune condition. And remember, a lot of the autoimmune diseases are born out of things going wrong in the gut. And so if your gut's out of health, your immune system's out of whack, your body starts attacking healthy tissue in the body, and that's how you get autoimmune disease. So this is why this is so important. Her deficiencies: magnesium, zinc, potassium, vitamin D, B1, B2, B6, B12, folate, elevated 5-HIAA and pyroglutamic acid, and carnosine. Now this one did not have high levels of hippuric acid in the urine, but she did experience chronic diarrhea, no E. coli, and after just 4 weeks, negative for Sibo. Patient 5, fatigue, joint pain, low ferritin, constipation, and obsessive compulsive disorder. Those were all the main concerns of this one, 23-year-old female. Nutrient deficiencies: magnesium, potassium, ferritin, B6, folate, and B12. By the way, when they're deficient in potassium, don't misunderstand that to mean that you need to be supplementing with potassium. We talked about this in a Jimmy Rants the other day. When you equalize your sodium in your body, there's a system in the body that naturally will normalize your potassium levels. So don't think I'm deficient in potassium, that means you need to eat and take a supplement for potassium. Not always. Most of the time, if you get enough sodium, that will balance out the sodium potassium in your body naturally. So all of these tend to have potassium as a deficiency. There was presence of hippuric acid in the urine, gastrointestinal issues, constipation, as well as poor thyroid function leading to that constipation. Normal with E. coli, but after just 5 weeks, her methane went from 5 to 0. Sibo completely shored up. And then the last one, patient 6, a 49-year-old female, main concern, the autoimmune form of hypothyroid called Hashimoto's, rosacea, and endometriosis. Major autoimmune going on in this lady. Nutrient deficiencies: magnesium, B1, B2, B3, B6, biotin, folate, B12, glycine, elevated arabinose, elevated 5-HIAA, pyroglutamic acid, and 1-methylhistidine. There was presence of hippuric acid in the urine, gastrointestinal issues, slow bowel movements, again, probably because of the Hashimoto's, the hypothyroidism. Normal E. coli, but after 6 weeks of the carnivore diet, negative for Sibo. And so they also asked each of the 6 patients a brief overview of what their experience was like being on the carnivore diet, because you might be like, well, maybe they hated it, but they sucked it up because they were getting benefits in their health. Let's see what they said. Patient 1, remember, a 22-year-old female. I enjoyed the diet and continued on after the study was over with a low-carb, low-fiber diet. What that resulted in a rapid weight loss and about 2 kilos lost during the study period, and then the folate she got from other food sources. Did not eat liver. She didn't like liver. We don't, any of us, like liver. You're weird if you like liver, by the way, because it's got a funky monkey taste. But anywho, patient 2, 65-year-old female, found it boring without vegetables. Had serious cravings for sweets. She did say, I got less bloating and I slept better. No physical side effects from being on the carnivore diet. And she also dropped 2 kilos. That's about 5 pounds, 5 or 6 pounds. CRP, listen to this, that's a key inflammation marker. It started at 5, which is really high. Typically you want it below 3 and optimally under 3. It started at 5, and then she was on the diet for just 4 weeks. And in just 4 weeks, she went from 5 to 0.77 on her CRP. So she went from really high to optimal in just a month. Those people who tell you Oh, you haven't lost enough weight yet on your carnivore diet. You don't have to lose weight to see major changes in your health. And this definitely showed it. Her HbA1c went from 6.0, which is pushing, it's pre-diabetes at that point, down to 5.1, which is healthy as all get out. Anything under 5.5 with A1C is incredible. Patient 3, 46-year-old female, experienced better energy and found the diet very tolerable. All the body aches during the first week was all that she had. She had body aches. That's typical. Some of the keto flu that tends to happen. She also lost 2 kilos during her period of time that she was on it. Patient 3 was on it patient 3 was the one that only lasted 2 weeks. She lost 2 kilo in just 2 weeks. And since the study ended, she's lost 11 kilo total. So that's good. Patient 4, 48-year-old female, said she had a difficult adaptation period. Otherwise, it was tolerable. Tongue coating disappeared. So if you ever go on a keto or carnivore diet and you get that weird like coating on your tongue, that's not abnormal. A lot of people have that, kind of a heavy sensation in the mouth. It's an adaptation period. It's probably where the ketones are starting to be in your body, and that's a sign that you're in ketosis. So celebrate that if you ever get that. Her side effects were diarrhea, low energy in the first 2 weeks. She was on the diet for 4 total weeks. She lost weight being on the carnivore diet, but they didn't record what her weight loss was. Patient 5 said she enjoyed, 23-year-old female, enjoyed the diet, less headaches, joint pain, and stomach pain. There were no physical side effects. She was on the diet for a total of 5 weeks, and she didn't lose weight, but she really wasn't trying to. She was trying to what was patient 5? Fatigue, joint pain, constipation, OCD, and low ferritin. So she talked about having less headaches, less joint pain, less stomach pain. All a win. And then the last one, patient 6, 49-year-old female, enjoyed the diet, continued on with a low-carb, low-fiber diet. Hair and nail quality improved. The physical side effects, adjustment problems with diarrhea, rapid weight loss during the first week. I don't know that I would be complaining if I had rapid weight loss when I start a diet change. But in her case, she was on it for 6 weeks, you guys. In 6 weeks of being on the carnivore diet, she lost 10 kilo. That's 25 pounds. Rapid weight loss. I'm wondering if when she went carnivore, because she had hypothyroidism, endometriosis, rosacea, slow bowel movements, maybe the slow bowel movements, some of that stuff was backed up in her. And when she went carnivore, kaboom, and all that stuff got out of her. And that's why it showed up on the scale as rapid weight loss. But isn't that amazing? Like all of that happened for them as a direct result of being on this diet. All right, let's go back to the main part of the study. All right, so the exploratory analyses. With an extensive amount of laboratory analyses available for each patient, we checked for other interesting findings other than Sibo. According to the measurements, there was no distinct evidence from the stool test that Sibo caused any kind of unsatisfactory digestion of fats and proteins, even though most patients had self-reported digestive issues. So this is interesting. A lot of people, when they go on a carnivore diet or a keto diet and they start increasing the amounts of fats, I hear from people like that all the time. I don't handle fats very well, but thankfully none of these patients in this case study had that kind of issue. All the patients, though, did have nutrient deficiencies according to the blood and urine panels. Hippuric acid was present in the urine of all the patients except one, and it may be a marker for gut bacteria overgrowth. So that's something to keep an eye on. If you ever run your hippuric acid in your urine, they can see if you're having that test, if it's the presence of hippuric acid in your urine, that could be a sign you've got a gut bacterial overgrowth going The comprehensive stool test also revealed elevated E. coli content in 2 of the patients. No other Sibo-related bacteria. E. coli is one of the major players associated with having hydrogen-dominant Sibo. So what were some of the limitations of this study? The lactulose breath test has been shown to have a higher sensitivity but a lower specificity as compared to the glucose breath test. We argue that the test with the higher sensitivity, which is the lactulose breath test that they used, is a much better choice for detecting Sibo in a functional medicine setting, especially when the short-term dietary treatment can be considered having very few side effects. However, because of a lot of the contradicting reports about the effectiveness of various types of Sibo testing, this may be a weakness in our report. This was also unsupervised dietary intervention. Even though the patients were highly motivated, it's really impossible to verify to what degree they followed the diet. So they didn't put them in a metabolic ward. They basically gave them the instructions. Here's what you eat, record what you eat, and then report back to us. Rather than being in a metabolic ward, which then they could feed them exactly, and they could see exactly, and they could measure exactly all the everything. They didn't do that with this. Furthermore, even though Sibo tests were adequately timed before and after the diet intervention, all additional tests were spread out rather than perfectly timed just before and just after the carnivore weeks. Another limitation, every single one of the study patients were female, reflecting that 70% of the patients in this functional medicine clinic are female. And again, Martina Johansson, I know her. I've met her. She's come on an event that I've been a part of before. And yeah, she attracts female clients primarily to her office. So that's why all of the patients in this particular study tended to be female. Also, commercially available diagnostic tools for measuring hydrogen sulfide Sibo didn't even exist until October 2020. So she may need to do this kind of thing again with new patients, maybe try to find some male patients. But yeah, when you think about small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, it's generally women that tend to get inflicted with this anyway. All right, so let's get to the discussion. This retrospective case report from a functional medicine clinic is, to the best of our knowledge, the first published evidence that a short-term, exclusively animal-based, zero-carb carnivore diet will normalize hydrogen-positive lactulose Sibo breath tests. The patients chose to eat this therapeutic diet for a period of 2 to 6 weeks. The rationale for the diet was the fact that most clinically successful treatments for Sibo published so far result in 80 to 84% remission in 2 to 4 weeks. As shown in this paper, our clinical experience with a carnivore diet reveals an equally high success rate, but with the added benefit of being much more palatable and much more suitable for people with hypoglycemia and patients with insulin resistance. A carnivore diet is cost-effective, readily available, and results in better satisfaction after meals because it decreases the cravings for sweets. So conventionally, a double peak in lactulose hydrogen breath test, one due to Sibo and the other from colonic fermentation, would be considered diagnostic for Sibo. Other studies suggest that a rise in breath hydrogen above 20 ppms within 90 minutes after ingestion of the lactulose would also be a positive test. So following this rationale, in conjunction with the fact that all the patients had gastrointestinal issues and nutrition deficiencies, it's likely the patients indeed did suffer from Sibo. However, patient 3 and 5 lacked a distinct double peak while simultaneously suffering from chronic constipation. We acknowledge this is an interesting observation, as some data also suggests that patients with constipation have different breath test results than those who have IBS or diarrhea. Patients 3 and 5 also had the most prominent reductions in their methane gas from the carnivore diet, which then led to less constipation. So according to all of our observations, as well as the patient's own experiences, the diet intervention resulted in a resolution of their gut issues. Several patients experienced additional benefits such as weight loss, increased state of well-being, even though the first week of zero carb can be tough for those limiting their carb intake. In comparison with the elemental diet, which is the typical approach for Sibo, the carnivore diet provides more satiety, biocompatible nutrients, general enjoyment since you're not restricting calories, and the patients have the freedom to choose their daily food as long as they stay within the parameters of animal-based foods. This makes the diet much more enjoyable than the elemental diet, which seemingly is just as effective. Unfortunately, meat, organ meats, animal fat have such a bad rap due to weak epidemiological studies linking these to heart disease and cancer. That's why people fear eating those things. However, it is possible and probably safe to say that very few of the heavy meat eaters in these studies ate a zero carb, zero fiber carnivore diet. Much more factors come into play in the development of lifestyle diseases. They probably also smoke. They also probably drink alcohol. They probably train frequently, and they have a poor overall quality of life. Although small case reports have been published, no large randomized controlled trials have been made on the safety of following a carnivore diet for longer periods of time. And again, Dr. Sean Baker is working on that, conducting such a study. In the present material, no serious side effects were detected in following the diet for a few weeks as an elimination diet and to eradicate Sibo altogether. So the conclusion of the study, the present case report of 6 patients from a functional medicine clinic shows for the first time that eating a zero carb, zero fiber carnivore diet has the potential to normalize hydrogen positive Sibo breath test in a comparable manner to the elemental diet, which is the traditional way of treating Sibo, but with the added benefit of being much more palatable and easier to endure. So all the data points we shared for this short-term carnivore diet as an evolutionary sound, cost-effective, and readily available addition to our therapies for Sibo should merit further evaluation in a much larger study. So there you have it, you guys. That is pretty amazing. Let's see at the end if they show the journal. I printed this out and I just totally chopped off the name of the journal. But the title of it, again, for those of you that came in late, a zero carbohydrate carnivore diet can normalize hydrogen positive small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, lactulose breath test, a case report. The main researcher is Martina Johansson out of Sweden. And again, I know Martina personally. I've been able to speak on a stage with her on previous occasions. So go check this out. Go look that up. If you're watching this on the replay, I'll try to have a link down below so that you can just click on that and go right to it. But what do you think about this? This is really awesome that even though it's a case report, and I don't know, case report, 6 people, big whoop, Jimmy, but it sets the groundwork for, hey, look, all 6 of them saw benefit. 5 of them had complete eradication of their Sibo. The only one that did not eradicate it had a significant improvement, but they only did it for 2 weeks. Had that one patient done it for 4 weeks, probably would have eradicated their Sibo as well. But anybody that you know that's ever gone through gut health issues and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, it hurts. It's a mess. It's horrible. And if eating meat as a hack for a month can kill it and fix it, why would we not do this? All right, guys, let's see what you have to say. We're going to come here first to Instagram, then over to Facebook, finally over to Twitch. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Something tells me you guys were real quiet today because I was throwing a lot of information at you, like pew, 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 and you were like listening intently, so you had nothing to say. The only thing that happened was Val's cat stepped on her phone. It said, "Call me weird, VAOM." When that popped on the screen, Val, I was like, "Call me weird?" I was going to go, "Hey, Val, you're weird." Sorry, can't resist. That was funny. Thank you, Instagram, for nothing because I got no comments from you. Let's see if Facebook did any better. Facebook, what you got? Nope, nothing at Facebook. See, I just like confounded you guys today. Seriously, like no comment about Sibo getting cured with a carnivore diet? This is awesome news. Get excited. It's good. All right, Twitch, you're my only hope today. Cariana says, I have to tell you, we went crabbing this weekend and we all caught our limit. Talk about a carnivore feast. Ooh, I love crab. You can invite Jimmy Moore to a crab fest anytime. Just have plenty of melted butter for me to dip it in. And yeah, I'll be happy. Shirley says, I love studies like these. Yes. Yeah. Studies like this remind me that what we're doing is not in vain. That eating this way is indeed helping. Like, I know sometimes you're thinking, okay, what about? And then you have like doubt, pop in your mind. But you know how you feel. You know that when you eat keto or you eat carnivore, that you have amazing energy, that your brain health is calm, and you get all these benefits. And in this case, reverse disease that's a bitch. Like, Sibo hurts. Like, I've never had to experience that myself, but it ain't good. And I've heard from people that have dealt with this kind of thing. Anytime somebody has a gut health issue, I always go, get rid of the carbs. Just get rid of all the carbs in your diet. Because if you have digestive issues and you have issues in your gut that seem to be exacerbated when you eat carbohydrate, just eliminate the carbohydrate. Now, people can't wrap their heads around that. Go, oh my gosh, I got to have carbs, or da-da-da. But then that's when they end up going carnivore, and then they're like, well, wait a minute, I don't feel bad anymore. What's going on? Well, you've eliminated the culprit of what was exacerbating your health problems. Saya says, wow, quiet day. Mostly carnivore, loving it myself. Yes, they're starting to talk to me over here on Instagram now. I'm going to come back to you, Instagram. I see you guys have woken up. Cariana, keto carnivore cured my plantar fasciitis of all things. Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of plantar fasciitis getting better because of keto carnivore. Interesting. Sorry, multitasking. Good information. That's good news. I think I need to make that switch, says Emily. I think most of us that have been low carb and then kind of low carb real food and then low carb real food keto are now going, I think for some of us, low carb real food keto carnivore tends to be the answer. I've actually been carnivore for 3 years now. I looked at the calendar recently. I was talking to a friend yesterday who eats carnivore, and I was helping her. She's like, I know you don't know much about carnivore because you're the keto guy. I'm like, what do you mean I don't know anything about carnivore? I've been eating carnivore for 3 years. And she was like, what? 3 years? I thought you were the keto guy. I'm like, you can be keto and carnivore. All right, guys, let's see. Angie says, yay for meat. Yes, yay for meat. Eat the meat. Joshua says, do you know offhand what percentage of people suffer from Sibo? I do not have that statistic offhand, but anybody that deals with some kind of digestive issues, that deals with pain and discomfort and bloating, that's a lot of people. I can't imagine anecdotally if you added all those people, not all of them would have Sibo, but would have some kind of gut disturbance. It's probably at least a third of the people. Maybe more. But specifically Sibo, I don't know. I don't remember interviewing anybody on my podcast about Sibo and looking at that statistic. But I'll try to find out the answer to that. I'm not sure if a quick search would be able to see that or not, but that's a good question. I don't know. Stacy says, I think the symptoms that you've described are so much more common for so many people than we know. Yes, they just put up with it, don't they? They're like, well, I guess this is how my stomach's supposed to be. And they never really dig deeper into thinking that maybe they've got a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And a couple of those patients developed E. coli on top of that. Again, once you get like an ugly bug in your gut, it is hard to get rid of it. And it takes, targeted like antibiotic therapy, but then that creates problems of its own in your digestion and creates more diarrhea. And it does. And so seeing a functional medicine doctor is why it's so important to try to dial this in. Angie says, one of my sisters is always saying she's bloated. Now I'm thinking she's fermenting. Oh, yeah. Oh yeah, if there's bloating in there, think about it. Why would there be bloating? Because there's gas. Why would there be gas? Because some bad bug in there is going to town on the carbohydrates that you're eating. And then they're farting all inside of her, and that just bloats them up. So yeah, if you're experiencing bloat, I highly recommend go on, at least for a period of time, a carnivore diet and watch what happens. That bloat will probably go away. And especially ladies, I know some ladies that I know that they have this bloating issue. And it looks like you're kind of mildly pregnant when you're bloated to that extent. Does not seem very comfortable to me when I see that. So try carnivore and see if it helps. Stacy says plantar fasciitis is sugar related from what I understand. So that would make sense if you went keto carnivore, that it would improve. See, did you hear that? Who was that? Cariana, that your plantar fasciitis got better. It's a sugar thing. So that makes sense. Carnivore is keto. Well, carnivore should be keto. Let's put it that way, Angie. That's a great question. And she's been carnivore ketovore for 2 years. Carnivore should be keto, but I think you can overpower your carnivore diet with protein to the level that you're not in ketosis. And this is a tricky one because, and I did a recent Jimmy Rants where I talked about this. I think carnivore dieters show less ketones because their body becomes very, very efficient at using the ketones they make for fuel. And so when you prick your finger or however you test, you don't show a high number on the ketones because as you're making those ketones, you're using them. So I suppose I'm agreeing with you. Carnivore is keto, but you won't always see it on a way that you measure. But that doesn't mean you're not in ketosis. That's why you pay attention to a lot of the symptoms to see, okay, do I have clearer mind? Do I have lots of energy? Do I have satiety? Those are all the key signs that you're in nutritional ketosis. Joshua says, I know the Sibo rates are high. I just don't know how high. Yeah, if you find out, Joshua, let me know. Let's see. Low carb keto cured my plantar fasciitis too. I've got on all three of the formats. Somebody has said that one. So if you have plantar fasciitis, definitely give keto carnivore a try and see what happens. Becky says, I do keto carnivore, high fat, moderate protein. Yeah, I think keto carnivore for someone with insulin resistance is probably a good idea because you still have that issue with your body not being able to handle glucose. And you've got to be mindful of the glucose effects of protein. It's not great effects, definitely not to the effect of carbohydrate, but there's still glucose effects if you eat predominantly protein with insulin resistance. Denise says, are eggs carnivore? Oh yeah. So that list that Johanna had in her study, let's take a look at the actual diet, was all meats, organ meats, fish, poultry, tallow, lard, and eggs. So yes, and thank God, because I have 15 backyard chickens back there that poop out breakfast for me every day. And so yes, glorious eggs. If you can get farm-raised eggs, that would be wonderful. But yes, most certainly, anything that is animal-based like that would be considered carnivore. Becky says, not only insulin resistance, but also mental health as the mind loves ketones. Yes, your fathead brain is 70% fat, and it thrives when you feed it fat and the production of ketones that come from that. I think if you stay 1-to-1 protein fat, you'll stay in ketosis on carnivore. Yes, Crystal, 1-to-1 protein to fat, I actually ran the numbers, is 70% fat, 30% protein. Because remember, fat is 9 calories per gram. Protein is 4 calories per gram. So when you do a 1-to-1, when it comes to grams of fat and protein, when you do a 1-to-1 ratio, that tends to be 70% fat, 30% protein. So yeah, that's pretty much a perfect ideal. So when you're eating foods, try to get that 1-to-1 ratio. If you want to edge a little bit higher on the fat, like when you get a ribeye steak, that's going to be a higher percentage than 1-to-1. If you get pork belly, that's 90% fat. I was shocked when I saw the percentage of fat on pork belly. So if you get pork belly, you can offset it with a little leaner meat if you want to have some chicken that day. So it's fun. It's fun to kind of play around with that and to see what the differences are. But guys, spread the news. Brand new January 2021 Swedish case report. Again, the researcher Martina Johansson, you can look her up on Instagram. I know she's on here. She does live. She speaks in Swedish. So I go and I look and I comment to support her, but I'm like, I have no idea what she's saying. It's like, I was like, okay, I don't speak Swedish. If I went on there and went, hurdy-burdy-gurdy, no, that would not work because that's the Swedish chef. But they don't say hurdy-burdy-gurdy, I promise you. Spread the word, you guys, about this study. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. Come follow me right here over on the Jimmy Rants Instagram page. We do go live Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thank you so much for being here. We also simulcast on Facebook and Twitch. Don't forget, download the Twitch app. Follow Jimmy Moore Rants, and you'll be able to see the show there. If you missed the live, you can watch it on the replay right here on IGTV. It's also up over on Twitch. We also put it up on YouTube. Just type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. I will remind you today is Real Talk. It's Thursday, so I do a show podcast called Real Talk. And so today's guest on Real Talk is Dr. Dan French. He has a PhD in rhetoric. So many voices are out there trying to persuade and convince you of things. And there's ethical rhetoric and there's unethical rhetoric. And he helps you understand the differences between the two. Wonderful, wonderful conversation, especially in light of what's happening in the world right now and a lot of the messaging and things that are being said. Go watch that interview over on my YouTube channel, or you can listen to it on the Real Talk podcast. LLVLC.com is where that is, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And then finally, catch all the past episodes of Jimmy Rants over at the official website. It's JimmyRants.com. All right, guys, that's it for now. Tomorrow, Ask Me Anything. So be sure to get your questions ready for me. Tomorrow we will do a special Ask Me Anything. Basically, it's your show on Fridays. I just show up. So hope to see you there at 11 a.m. Bye.